Hello and most welcome. Today we will discuss one of the most important aspects of our life, the relationship topic. Our guest today is Chantal, certified love and relationship coach. Chantal Randeville shares the simple yet powerful principles that can help you nurture love even before you officially become a couple. Let's welcome Chantal to the show. Chantal, tell us how are you doing today?
I'm great. I'm excited to be here. I'm excited to have this conversation. It's the topic I don't get sick of talking about, love.
Wow. So that's what most of the people actually want to know because this part of a big part of our life.
Oh my
Yeah.
God, such a big part of our lives. Yes.
So tell us first what you can tell about yourself.
Oh wow, I'm going to give you the long or short version. I'll do a mix of both.
We have a big
So I'm sure.
passion for that because we
Yeah.
love to hear about this topic.
That's awesome. So how do you become a love and certified coach, a certified love and relationship coach? I often get asked. And
Mm,
the path to actually leading me to here was literally my own personal journey and my struggles that I had myself in love. I mean, I just could not figure out how to attract the right person in my life. And I was single for just a little under 18 years.
mm,
So, in my early 20s, I was always fascinated with love, dating, and relationships. And I was in a relationship very young, from 19 to 27. And when I left that relationship, because I realized I had changed a lot from being 19 to the kind of person I attracted, which I would say there was a lot of admiration. And when I
mm,
started diving into being more into my personality and who I was as a person, it was actually a problem in our relationship. My boyfriend at the time felt very threatened by my big personality. And
mm,
I remember, thank God I was already very self-aware back then, but I was like, how is it that I can be with someone that doesn't really accept who I am? And I left the relationship, and I remember writing down a list of everything I wanted to experience, try, understand. And that list ended up taking me 10 years to go through, which was great. I did a lot of beautiful, crazy, anything you can possibly imagine. But the other thing that I did was I had a massive curiosity just about human behavior and
mm,
trying to understand why we show up the way we do in relationship. Why are we struggling so much? And that was innate in me even in my early 20s. So I would like consume and read and attend every possible conference, speaker, experience that you can potentially imagine through it. And 10 years ago, I finally decided to do my coaching certification. But there was something in me, it wasn't defined on how I wanted to explore the teachings. And I felt at that point I wasn't quite ready. I still needed a little bit more patience and empathy for other people in their own journey, because everybody has their own journey in their own time when they decide to understand and want to make the
mm,
changes, especially when we're talking about massive changes in life.
mm,
And when I finally did meet my amazing partner that I've been with now for 5 years,
mm,
I realized, it's one thing to attract the right partner, but it's a
mm,
whole other thing being in relationship. And we've never been taught the actual skills on how to navigate in relationship.
mm,
So we go through the whole dating process. It's already really difficult to make sure that you attract the right person.
mm.
And we don't really know how to manage being in relationship. So the goal for me is really trying to teach people how to learn to be in relationship before we actually go into relationship, because there's certain things that you need to make sure they're into place as fundamentals to help you succeed. And that's where it all came together for me, because I saw that the work I had applied with everything I had consumed over the years worked for me in my life, and I saw crazy results, and I still see amazing results. So
Mm.
that's when it all came together, and I was like, I need to start teaching this. And the beauty of COVID, because there was a lot of negative, but there was a lot of positive. It was a
Mhm.
COVID baby, where I went from traveling every other week in my And my then job, which I used to work in the wine industry, which is very relationship driven. You're in sales, so you're always talking and whining about love. And I finally had time to kind of create the program, and I beta tested it, and then I started writing the book that was officially launched and released last week on Valentine's Day. And here I am, 3 years later, thriving in this world and changing one relationship at a time.
Congratulations for the book.
Thank you.
And
Thank you.
first, what do you think? What is more important if we start with this? Attracting the right person is important, or um knowing how to be in a good relationship is important first?
Oh, those are two great questions, and I think they're both equally, they kind of both come together. I think it's really important to get clear on what it is that you are looking for. This is something that I talk about the first couple chapters of the book, because most people tend to think they know what they want. But when we start diving into it really in detail, and they don't. And it's funny because most people want the same thing. It's I always laugh with clients. I'm like, wow, you and like the rest of the world on this planet all want the same thing. Someone that's financially well off, that's funny, that's, you know, this way physically and that. So, but we do not take the time to think, how do I want to grow and evolve in relationship? We always make it about the partner. And these are questions that take you need to take yourself to a whole other dimension, because it has a lot more depth to it. Asking yourself, how do I want to grow and evolve in relationship, kind of fits in your second question, where it's like, what do you need to learn to be in a relationship? And for me, a lot of these things are value systems that, like, I'll just give an example. For communication is a simple one, right? You really need to have great communication in your relationship to be able to make it through. And this is something that people can start practicing before they go into romantic relationships. Because a lot of the things that I talk about in the book, or even as I teach for romantic partnerships, are applicable to all of our relationships. And these are muscles that we need to develop before going into our relationships. So they're applicable to friends, they're applicable to family dynamics, and at the workspace. So I think they both come together, where it's like, really get clear on what it is that you need and want, not only from a partner, but from a relationship perspective. Walk the talk, because a lot of people think they say things, but they do the total opposite. And there's science actually proven behind that people do that. And then it's important to understand what do you bring to the relationship? What are you ready to show up for? Because a relationship, I always say this, is a threesome. It's you, your partner, and the relationship. And the relationship has an entity of its own. And you always have to think, how is my behavior? How is what I'm going to say? How do I get triggered? How is my, whatever the hell it is that you're doing, going to service the relationship? And most people today, when they go into relationship, they do not take that into consideration. It's about me, what I want, my needs. It's not about us. It's always very self-absorbed. And that's why I always say, ask yourself, why do you want to be in a relationship? And how do you define, what does being in a relationship really mean to you? Because you have to want to be in a relationship for the right reasons for it to succeed.
So, how to attract, and how do we know that we are attracting the right person in the first place?
Oh, that's a trick question.
Yeah.
Well, and I'll go back to this. The clearer you are on your vision, and the more self-awareness that you develop and have for yourself. So one of the things that I did that was very, very differently from all of the relationships that never worked out for me is I decided to do things differently, and I asked myself the hard questions. I really got clear on what it is I needed versus what I wanted, because wanted are very self-absorbed. They're very superficial. You know, as I said, I want him to cook. I want him to be funny. I want her to be skinny and blonde. I want him so it's like, I want, where needs are like, they're deal breakers, and they're almost like things that you couldn't live without. They're almost like air and breath.
Mm.
So for me, it was security, trust, someone that accepted me for who I was with my big personality, because I always kept hearing when I was single, maybe you intimidate men, which wasn't
Mm.
the case. Why would I want to be with a man I intimidate? So I
Mm.
needed to sit in who my true authentic person was.
Mm.
So by getting clear on what those things that I really needed and knowing myself so well, because of my experiences and everything that I had learned that hadn't serviced me, what this does to people when they're looking to attract and make sure they attract the right person is that you don't get blindsided by the gold, shiny new
Mm.
diamond that shows up,
Mm.
where sometimes you'll pretend to be someone that you really aren't because you really like this person, or you think you like this person and you want to please, or you'll compromise your own personal needs because you'll excuse them and say it'll change with time, or you'll feel some red flags surfacing and you'll excuse the behavior and shove it under the rug.
Mm.
So intuition plays a really big role when we're looking out there and we're dating, and I think that if you want to know if you're with the right person, you need to listen to the inner voice. But to know the inner voice, you really have to make sure that you have a lot of self-awareness and you know yourself. And that's why for me, it's a non-compromisable to do and get clear on that vision that I talk about of what you are looking for in relationship.
Mm. So there is an old saying that says, "Be what you want to attract." How much it resonate with relationship?
Oh my God, 100%. Like this is It's a it's a massive game changer, because I remember, and I'll give a concrete example because people can relate to this. And I had been diving into this work, and I was reading and I was consuming all of this stuff. And I realized when I met my partner 5 years ago, it was the first time ever I was my genuine self, that I decided I was going to be exactly who I am with all my greatness and all my flaws, and
Mm.
not make an excuse to not be accepted for either or.
Mm.
And I was 44 years old at the time. 44 years old in my life. This is the first time that I stick to being my true authentic self. So I had chosen to be who I was and be how I wanted someone to show up in relationship myself. So the
Mm.
standards were much higher for me to attract a higher vibrational match, because
Mm.
I was being that own person myself. And I remember the conversation we had when we had been probably dating within about 6 to 8 months. We knew things were getting serious, and we had both decided we were each other's people. And I had said, are you ready to hold each other to high standards in this relationship? And he was like, what do you mean? I said, well, I'm not looking to be in a relationship like the average person out there, which the average person doesn't really succeed, or they're not healthy, they're not thriving, they're not growing, it's toxic. So, but that takes work, and we both need to make this agreement that we will really hold each other to high standards with each other and the relationship. And we both agreed to that, and we made that agreement, and we
Mm.
hold that agreement on a daily basis. Don't get me
Mm.
wrong, we have weeks that will fall off the wagon, but
Mm.
it's much easier to say, oh, we fell off the wagon, let's get back onto it, because our
Mm.
relationship needs to be held with accountability.
Mm. So, what do you think? How much it is realistic today, the contemporary women, that they put a standard for themselves? Like, for example, most of the people says that the woman have a higher standard than the reality. As your experience, what is this? Is that true?
Well, what are the high standards, right? And we have to take in consideration how we've evolved as a society. I mean, why people choose to be in relationships today versus 100 years ago is
Mm.
very, very different. We would mate to procreate. and the woman would take care of the household and the man would like be the provider. It was literally just for that. Where today, with how society has evolved, we're looking into mates because we want to, it's not only to create a family, but it's also to be fulfilled in every possible way through the different areas that we are looking for in our lives. So I want to make sure that people understand that difference. Also, women have, become much more strong in the workforce, more independent. Feminism has been a strong thing, but I don't think there's anything wrong with high standards. You need to define what those high standards mean for you. And you also need to, and I'm talking for heterosexual relationships here, not necessarily same-sex relationship, but we both carry in men and women masculine and feminine energy, correct?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that what has happened over the years that I'm seeing where there's a lot of conflict, women have become much more masculine in their energy, independence, driven, they work, they raise, like they do everything, but they also do not leave that room when they get back home in the relationship for the man to actually provide. And when I'm saying provide, it has nothing to do with being financially providing. It's just that there's certain DNAs in men and women, as even though we've evolved as a society, that you cannot change the DNA of a man and a woman. And the DNA of a man is like providing and protecting and of course procreating, but women definitely more nurturing and being in like flow. So I would say the biggest issue that I see, and I work with them all the time because I was one of them myself, is not making room to receive as a woman from a man or a partner's perspective. So you can be this woman in your workspace and be strong, independent, manage your own stuff, but there needs to be a little bit more lenience when you get home in your relationship to not manage, to not control, to not try to change, which we often do as women when we are in a relationship. We're always trying to manage our men, and I get told on all the time by my by my boyfriend because old habits are hard to die sometimes. And we've through our communication, we've figured out the solution. So when this happens and I retract back to old ways, he'll call me out on it. We have a safe word that we use, and he'll call out that safe word. And then it's like, I'm like trying to manage, I'm trying to control, and I'm not making room for him to actually provide, which completely emasculates him. So I would say that's my perspective on that topic. Does that make sense?
Yeah, exactly. And in your publication, you said about the self-confidence and self-worth. So why knowing your worth and develop self-confidence is important in relationship?
Oh, that's huge. And I'll give myself as an example again. So I had a pattern of attracting non-emotional available partners all the time. And I couldn't figure out why. And when I finally did the work and I figured out why, one of the reasons why I had a massive case of lack of self-worth. I did not feel deserving of the relationship and the kind of love I was looking for. And someone at the time had told me, Chantal, you've been fishing at the bottom of the sea this whole time. And I was like, what do you mean fishing at the bottom of the sea? Well, he goes, what's at the bottom of the sea? It's all the bottom feeders that eat whatever the fish on top are dropping at the bottom. So you want to be here, you deserve to be here, but you keep staying here. And it was such an aha moment for me because I realized I wasn't giving myself permission to feel deserving of what I wanted and I was worthy of. So the problem is if you don't have any self-confidence or don't feel worthy of something, you're not going to attract the right person for you. Exactly. You will, you're not aligned in your mind versus in your heart. So this was one of the reasons that I kept attracting the kind of partners I was attracting, was because I didn't feel worthy of receiving it. So self-love and I'll add the word self-love, self-confidence, self-worth for me all fall into that same dynamic, is that when you hold enough space for you, and I will use the word love for yourself, What this will also do when you are out there dating and you've done your vision and you've gotten some information about how to succeed in relationship, you will not compromise yourself. You will not disrespect yourself. You will listen to your intuition. You will not excuse bad behavior because you love yourself enough, because you trust yourself enough, because you know that you are worthy of more than enough. And I think that's where people really get lost, is they walk on eggshells because they don't have enough self-worth. And when you sit in that space, I mean, it's not just in romantic relationships. You're the kind of people you'll attract around you will completely transform as well. You're taking it up a notch up. So for me, my relationship, if something, God bless my boyfriend, something would happen tomorrow, I'd be devastated because we have such a beautiful relationship, but I have such self-love and worth for myself that I know that, something else will come along, or I'd feel so comfortable in my own skin that it would never destroy me, if that makes sense.
Exactly. And this explanation relate to the low self-esteem. So what is your idea about that? Some of the people has traumatic experiences like PTSD and childhood traumas and those things that make it difficult for them to smoothly do the process that you say. So what is your recommendation for them, because they already have a low self-esteem, and you mean they have to first, because as an example, most of the people who has a low self-esteem, they go to traumatic or toxic relationships that seeking self-esteem there, and even lower their self-esteem as a result of their toxic relationship. So what is your recommendation for them? Do you want them to go first see psychiatrist or whatever?
Yes. So lots to unpack here. And I think when you are suffering from that, and you are, because there's, again, the self-awareness piece is a big component. So if you are acting, being, have beliefs, patterns, and you don't know why, it's really hard to figure out the solution, right, to the problem. So once you have identified the problem, so if you know what your trauma is, and why you are the way you are, you've done half of the work. So that's why I say the more you know about yourself, it's easier when you meet someone to be able to communicate. I get triggered when you say this because when I was a kid, every time I'd talk, I'd get, I don't know, backslapped by my father. So the tone or whatever, because people, we all come with baggage. We all have traumatic experiences in life. We've all been through things that we see at different eyes levels because of just our own personal circumstances. So knowing and understanding what those things are makes it really easier to tie in the definition to it, to be able to explain it, to be able to know what I need to change, how I need to, or catch yourself even when it's happening. So I would definitely, if you do not have self-awareness and you do not know what your issues, why these things keep repeating, we'll often say, in my case, constantly attracting unemotional available men. I had to ask myself at one point, like, why is this happening? And I needed to understand. So I dove into the work even deeper. And I did a lot of therapy. I worked with a lot of coaches, and I strongly encourage people to do so, because we can't do everything on our own. And sometimes, someone that has a way of making you or asking you the right questions can give you answers in such a quick way. And it's like, why would you want to put yourself through this by yourself when you can have someone that holds your hand to support you to get through this thing, right? So definitely get some help, work. Today, there's such great information, podcasts like yours. There's free podcasts. Like, there's so many beautiful videos that are accessible online for free. So educate yourself, right? Learn. And then I would say that if you have identified the trauma and why you keep doing the same things over and over again, and you can't seem to break the cycle, again, get the help. And the second thing is that we have a tendency to think that we can resolve something in a day or two when we've been doing something for most of our lives. So for example, my behavior of attracting non-emotional available men, once I understood what it was and what I needed to do to change it, it took 8 years because I had been doing this for 38 years. So you do not change a mentality overnight. So you need to allow yourself the time to work on a new muscle. And I give the example, it's kind of like, if you want a six pack, a lot of there's not a lot of people that are naturally born with a six pack. They have to work at it, and it takes a long time. And by the time you get there, you actually have to continue doing the work, because if you do not, you'll lose the six pack. So human behavior and beliefs and patterns are the same way. And I think I can give another example that a lot of your audience will relate to is vulnerability. When we talk about being in relationship, one of the things that we all need is to be vulnerable, to receive. And that was something that I struggled with all of my life. I was not vulnerable at all. I was very self-reliant. I was independent. I was used to just having myself to rely on. So thank God I was lucky that a girlfriend of mine told me one day, Chantal, if you can't be vulnerable with your own friends, how are you going to be vulnerable in a relationship one day? And it really stayed with me. And I decided that I wanted to develop that muscle. And how I did that was to choose one person, a friend that I felt very comfortable with, and explain to her, I'm trying to work on being more vulnerable. This is what I need from you. When I will come to you and share whatever it is I'm going through, I don't need you to judge me. I don't need you to tell me what to do. I just need you to hold space. And it took a good 6 to 7 months for me just to be comfortable with calling and saying, okay, I'm doing it now. I'm going to share. I'm going to be vulnerable, because I had never done it. So it just felt awkward. So I want people to understand change is uncomfortable, because we're so used to staying in our comfort zone, right? So change is uncomfortable, and you have to allow the uncomfortableness to happen. So it took me almost 7 months. And then, within less than a year after, I was like, wow, this is great. And sometimes you just need to vent, right? You just need to express and say what's happening. And I'm like, this is good that I don't have to deal with all my own stuff all the time. And then that went from one girlfriend to a second to a third. And then I was able to do it at work. When I was struggling at work, instead of pretending to know and I got everything, I was able to ask for help, or say, you know what, I actually don't know how to do this. You need to help me. So by the time I got into my relationship, my muscle had been working, because being vulnerable in a relationship and opening your heart to like a massive degree, which is what people really, really want, but man, we're afraid of doing it. And I experienced it myself, so I know what I'm talking about. It was hard. So thank God that that muscle had been working. So rewiring your brain is an everyday practice, especially if you have been through traumatic things and you keep repeating the same patterns.
So that was two great advice. The first one was to try to do self-awareness, to be more aware. And the second was to just be vulnerable. That was amazing. Yeah. So actually, not men, as a man, I also see men and women are afraid of being vulnerable. So that's a great advice. As I heard somewhere else, that the cat at home is vulnerable. That's why we love him. And the tiger is not vulnerable. That's why we are afraid of it. Yeah. So being vulnerable is good.
It is. And I will say, I will add this because I was doing research early January for the dating trends for 2024. And the article was asking me to kind of research the different generations. So Gen Z, and I was like, oh my God, I don't know about Gen Z. I had to. So as I started doing all the research for the different generations, I realized that there was one common denominator, whether you were 20 or whether you were 75. And this is that we have never been so craving deep emotional human connections. Never been. Like we want it. But there's a massive disconnect where we're so afraid of investing and opening our hearts, like massively. So the problem is, and this is where I say, if you're looking out for love over there, like if you're like, you want to experience deep human connections, you need to start with yourself. You need to start asking yourself, how can I show up? How can I make more time? How can I be more curious about people? How can I be kinder instead of just thinking of my own self-absorbed self? It starts with us. And last night was beautiful because I attended a dinner, and that's why I'm giving this example, because it has nothing to do with just the dating world. I was attending a dinner with 12 other entrepreneurs. It was a stranger dinner. And I ended up having beautiful conversations that revealed so much about one person because we made the time. We created a very safe space. People felt safe to confide because we were interested and we were attentive and we were listening. And I think that we all need to show up better on a human level that way, because that's the only way you get to see true vulnerability and really get to experience deep human connections. And I left the party last night. I was like, wow, did I ever have great, intentional, deep connections with people I had never met in my life.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Some says that if you know yourself better, you love yourself better. So if somebody else know you more, they love you more, even with vulnerability. But here is another question that if people knows your vulnerability, how to identify our boundaries and learning how to stick to them at the same time that we are vulnerable.
Oh, that's good. That's very good. I'm happy you're asking that. So again, this goes back, everything comes full circle. So the more self-love you practice and the more you honor yourself. So this is where, again, if you know yourself so well, you won't be afraid, and you love yourself enough, you won't be afraid to communicate your boundaries and stick to them, because you love yourself enough and you know yourself enough to say, I need this. This matters to me. And as a person that's in front of you, if you want a high level quality relationship, whatever that might be, whether it's a friend, a coworker, you need to own it yourself first. Now, with that said, there will always be, exceptions to the rules, meaning you try to be that person and you end up meeting just a person that's not nice, that's not cool, that will take advantage of you, and that could just not be a great person. And that happens. It does. We can't ignore that. But I think that the more you feel confident about who you are, that's why I think it's such an important practice. And that self-respect to stand in your power is very powerful, like super powerful, to not doubt yourself and what it is that you need or not need when you're communicating your boundaries. So, and then I would say, know with who you can do it as well. So again, this is where intuition, listening to your inner voice, I often know what I can say to people and what kind of conversation I want to have depending on who's in my audience. I just feel with who I can feel safe with. So that's the beauty of knowing yourself and paying attention to the details and the energy that's happening around you.
So, for example, can you give an example, like if any privacy is our boundary, for example, not touching each other's phone or checking, or as an example, Yeah, if you can give us a boundary that we have to stick on it and we don't have to um, leave to go like let the other party to break it. So what is an example of those boundaries?
So I'll give two examples, including the one that you just gave. So for privacy, for example, if privacy for you is important and your partner has an issue with it, as a partner, you need to ask yourself, why do I have a problem with him or her wanting their privacy? Do I feel insecure in my relationship? Is my partner making me feel a certain way that I need to be worried? So there's two things. When we communicate a boundary, whether you are the receiver or you are the actual person that's sharing it, everything has to be reciprocated for it to work. Everything. So if I'm telling you that my privacy is important, as we're just talking about, and then you take the time as my partner, you say, you know, I'm not comfortable with that because you're always sneaking around and it puts a doubt in me. I don't understand, like, can we maybe work around that? So you can actually communicate the boundary, how it's making you feel. And I always say it's important to talk from a perspective of how you feel versus like focusing on the problem, because it might be your past baggage that's surfacing, where this person, for them, is just natural to have, you know, privacy. Like, I like my things being private, but you're taking it personally because of your past baggage. And I'll give two concrete examples. So number one, for me in my relationship, one of my boundaries is you can't be late. I don't like my partner being late, and he has a massive problem. He's always late. Always late. And I get massively frustrated. So at one point, my boundary was this, because I had to focus on the solution as well. The problem doesn't solve anything. I said, you know, you can be late whenever you want, as long as it doesn't involve me. When I am involved as a person, I want you to show up on time, because you don't show up on time, I feel like it's a lack of respect for my time. My time isn't worth it. I do not like to do that to other people. I find it's a sign of disrespecting other people that are waiting for me as well. So that was my solution to the problem, was like, be late in every other area of your life, but when it involves me, you need to show up for me. That was my boundary. And it actually works really well. He's late. He's still late today with every other area of his life. But when it comes to us, and if I'm involved, it doesn't happen. Another argument with a boundary, for example, and I think a lot of people can relate to this, is when we are having an argument. My go-to, if I'm being triggered, I react, and I can like go into attack mode, and I was like, rah, 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 rah. But I know, remember the threesome? It doesn't service the relationship. So my boundary, or my ask, my need is, I need time to talk. I need time to go calm down, process, and we need to pick this up later. So my partner could say, I need to settle this now. I want to settle this now. But my boundary or my need is saying, I need time. So as a partnership with two people, if I'm taking the time to communicate my boundary or my need, you need to be able to say, okay, I get it. I'm not going to take it personally. I'm going to give you the time.
Exactly.
Because a lot of people take things personally, right? When we're sharing a boundary or a need, they take it personally. So we cannot take it personally, because the person has taken the time to tell you what it is that they need. Don't make it about you. It's like, okay, this is what my partner needs. So I go, I process my thing, but our agreement is that, you know, we don't let 10 hours go by for us to circle back, and I need to take ownership to come back and finalize the conversation. So are those two examples that kind of give?
Yeah, exactly. And what's your recommendation for a heartbreak, or for those who just broke up with loved one? Either it is the right partner or the wrong, but they are in a very bad mood, or they are going through a bad situation. What is the process of healing according to your experience and expertise?
Healing comes in different stages, and for different ways for different people. I think sitting with the breakup is the number one thing. Being okay with not being okay, because we're often trying to justify things or, brush off our feelings. And it's okay. It's okay to be disappointed. It's okay to be mad. It's okay to feel let down, to feel threatened, whatever the hell it is, sit with it. And I would really encourage people to journal their feelings, the process, because writing it down really helps the nervous system to regulate. And the other thing I suggest for people to do is ask themselves the questions. And again, this is where self-reflection and self-awareness is very powerful. Why didn't this work out? What did I need to learn from the situation? What did I do again that I keep repeating over and over from my past relationships that doesn't service me? And this is why it keeps on failing. Because you can sit in a place of, I'm never the chosen one, which happened to me all the time. I felt sorry for myself. I was such a victim. I was just like, it's never me. I'm never good enough. I don't understand. And where at one point I decided to have a different conversation where it's like, okay, it didn't work out. Obviously, the person's not for me. Probably the universe did me a favor. So what did I need to learn from this? Or maybe I needed to teach the other person something as well. And how can I grow from this? So changing the mindset where it's like, I'm going to be a better person going into the next relationship because I have understood this, because I realize I repeated the same things I used to do in even my previous relationship. So really questioning all the learning curves that you had from the past relationship to grow. Because we typically, when we lose something, if you choose to, it's only for better. It literally is, but you have to choose to see it that way. And you have to ask yourself the right questions. So those would be my recommendations.
So now the next stage, what are the key fundamentals before going into your new relationship?
That's awesome. There's a whole chapter in the book about that. So key fundamentals for me are definitely, one, start with self-love for yourself. Once you have that, you show up so differently in relationship. Communication, obviously, respect, acceptance of the other. We're often trying to change other people. And I think that's where, again, a lot of people fail or get disappointed because they think that they can change someone else, and we can't. We need to learn to accept people for who they are, with the good and the bad. Two of my favorite fundamentals I find are kindness and thoughtfulness. Kindness and thoughtfulness for me, and this is again a practice that I strongly recommend you apply in your everyday life. Because when I tell that to you, how does that make you feel? You said, so I could tell that it makes you feel good. These two words make you feel good. So for me, it makes me feel safe. It makes me feel important. It makes me feel loved. So imagine if you nurture kindness and thoughtfulness with people, what it creates is the other person wants to do the same naturally. And I'll give an example. A couple of weeks ago, I received a card in the mail from an acquaintance. We barely, we know each other through the industry, but we're not super close friends. She sent me a card to congratulate me of my book. And it was, amazing to see how, from the day I met you in your journey. And I was so touched because, and it was the littlest thing, sending a card by mail, but I felt so important. I was like, wow, I feel seen. And feeling seen is a beautiful feeling. And I was just like, wow, I need to make somebody else feel that way. And I remember it wasn't about giving the act back to her. It was like, I want to practice more thoughtfulness and little acts of services like this for people. that can make such a difference on how she just made me feel. So we nurture that a lot in our relationship. And it's the simple things, you know, when my boyfriend's always late and he's running out the door at the office in the morning, I will make him a coffee because I know he's running late. I could say, you know what, get up and put your clock to make sure that you have time to have your coffee. But I know how he is. I'm not going to change him, but I can have kindness and thoughtfulness and bring him a coffee because I know it'll make his day better. Because so there are little things like that that can make a huge difference on how you nurture the quality of a relationship. And this also keeps the fire going because you have that tenderness that develops between the two of you. That's amazing. So I say, practice it. Practice that muscle with your friends, with your family, at work. What could I do would be so, I know would make someone happy that, you know, I never think of doing, for example, is always a good question I ask myself. So those are a few of the fundamentals.
Great. Now, a personal question that may help our audience that, of course, you went through a lot, hard time, and until you get to here. So what was the turning point and what was the time you realized that something need to be changed? The first question, and the second, the books, that publications out there from the beginning that I remember, Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus is a book that I remember I read it long ago. So what was the book or the publication that you come across, and then who was your model in here, then your story here?
Oh, wow. Great questions. Okay, question number one, I would say my turning point was when I turned 38 after that 10-year journey that I had, you know, been all over the place, and I decided I wanted to actually meet someone serious, and then realized I kept, again, attracting these unemotional, available people. So I went deeper into the kind of work and a therapy that made me realize what was causing that pattern. And that from moment on, I was like, I need to not only consume and learn all of this stuff, I actually need to apply it. Because here's the thing, especially today, we're so like, we're over consuming, right? Especially on social media, we're like seeing all these things, we're hearing these things, and, you know, buzzwords like self-love and authenticity are like all over the place, but people are not walking the talk. They're just talking about it. They're not taking action and doing the actual work. So I finally decided to apply the work I had learned. And I decided to do things differently because I realized that everything I had done over the last 18 years was literally the same thing. So I needed to change my record. And one of the things was to start dating men that I thought were my type, because we often think we have a type. And I realized how I had been limiting myself to the pool out there because of what I think I wanted. And people do that a lot. We limit ourselves with what we think we want. And there's the triangle that I talk about in the book, where there's a massive difference between what you think you want, what you actually attract, and what's actually right for you. This is where you want to be, but we're often stuck here. It's just we stay stuck between these two things. So I started dating outside my comfort zone. I started dating men that I would have never been typically attracted to. And it made a massive difference because all of a sudden I had access to a whole new pool of people that I never gave the chance to. And I saw the results right away, actually. It was crazy. So I would say that was my defining moment, is like, that's where things turned around. And I would also say I was observing myself a lot with applying the work, where I was always asking myself the question. Again, this is the beauty of self-awareness, where I could see my old ways retracting or wanting to go back to old ways. But because I knew what my patterns and my beliefs were, it was easier for me to catch myself. So I always knew, or how to have that inner chat with myself to bring myself back. Because here's the thing, when I did meet my amazing man, I remember a lady had told me 6 months in, oh, you're totally going to self-sabotage. And I was actually insulted when she said that to me, because I was like, all the work has paid off. Like, I'm finally changing things. And I'm happy she did, because 4 months later, I caught myself in a situation trying to make every excuse in the book because it was too good to be true. It's not possible. He's too old. He's too this. He's too that. And I was like, oh, I'm totally self-sabotaging. So that's the power of self-awareness, is being able to catch yourself through your own bullshit.
Mhm.
And then I would say some of the greatest people and books that have had such an influence. I mean, I read the book Men from Mars and stuff. That was I read that in my 20s. But for me, it was a lot of Esther Perel's work, a lot of Wayne Dyer's work, which he was such a great storyteller and really made me understand when I talk about things like communication, thoughtfulness, kindfulness, of just how we need to take ownership on how we show up as human beings to be better. Like,
Mhm.
oh my God, there's so many of them. I'm trying to think now. There's so many great experts. Um,
So what do you
no.
think about those pickup artists and those manipulations? I know that pickup artists some of them may be good work, but I don't like generalize them. And there are some manipulations books out there. What do you think about them? Is this like a long-term help for people, or or just it is a short-term advice? What do you think about them overall, your idea? There
I
are
miss
a lot of books out there
yes,
under the title of pickup artist, and some of the
yes,
books are out there under the manipulations books in the
yes.
relationship, which show
Hmm.
you the techniques how to manipulate each other. So what is
Yeah.
your overall idea about them?
Oh, that's a good question.
Yeah, because
I honestly, there's a lot of stuff that I haven't read because I refuse to. So it's hard for me to actually um refer to say it's wrong. Because I do think there might be some things that are wrong, but there might be things that are okay as well. Um, and I would say again, for me, it's that having that self-awareness. What quality of relationship do you want to experience? And how do you feel being, called into that? And what do you feel as a value that matters? So let's say, you know, if some of these book talk about, like, you play a game and it's like, well, where's the authenticity in playing a game? Do you want to be with someone that plays games, or you want to be authentic and be able to be your true self? So that's why, again, you really need to ask yourself, what is it that really matters to you? What do I need? And what's your value system to be able to go out there and get the right information? And I think that people will resonate with different things at different times, including speakers, books. I remember reading a certain book at one point that was perfect then, but today I'm like, wow, that's like, I just evolved so much. It's different.
mm,
So, yeah, that's how I would answer that.
yeah, in this stage of your life, what do you think about seduction? Are you, what's your idea about that? That's the point that people make, that let's be seductive. Do you think that is authenticity, or something, or just
I love seduction. I find it's a lost art. Seduction is great. It's a beautiful thing about relationships and courtship. And I think a lot, today with everything that's happened, a lot of men are afraid to be, using seduction. As women too, it can actually, like any great quality or fault can become either or, right? Like seduction can
yes.
become a great quality, and it can also become a fault depending on how it's used. So it's all about balance. I think that I think there's a lot of value in seduction. I'm a massive sucker for seduction. I'm a seducer myself. Just on how I maybe not seducer, charm. Maybe that's the proper word I should be using, charm. So I would say, go for it.
Yeah, exactly. So thank you so
As
much,
long as it's done
Chantal.
genuinely.
Yeah, for answering a lot of questions today. Can you please tell us how people can find you and how to access your work?
Yes, I will do that. Hold on 1 second, sorry. So they can find me on my website at www.raiseyourlovesignal.com. Over there has all the information. If you want to work with me, it also has the links to buy my book, which is Raise Your Love Signal, a guide to attracting and keeping the love of your life, because isn't that what we all want? So you can find all the links on where to buy the book. And you can also find all my socials, but the platform that I'm most active is Instagram, and that is chantal.landreville is where you can find me. But I'm on TikTok, I'm on Facebook, and so yes.